Welcome to On the Couch, the podcast where real conversations meet real change. Pull up a seat, get comfortable, and join us as we dive deep into the conversations that matter most to Black and Brown communities. Hosted by Dr. Diamond and an incredible lineup of co-hosts, On the Couch brings you raw, insightful, and empowering discussions, from mental health and wellness to entrepreneurship, life insurance, healthcare, and everything in between. Our mission is simple: to educate, uplift, and create space for conversations that need to be heard. Whether you're here for practical advice, motivation, or just a dose of inspiration, you've come to the right place. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about the things that shape our lives, our futures, and our communities. This is On the Couch, where we keep it real, keep it relevant, and keep it moving. Let's get started.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the couch once again. So here we are. We're going to present a great topic as usual. What is post-traumatic slave syndrome? What is trauma, multi-generational trauma? This topic we really need to address and talk about. Last 2 weeks ago, we had 3 guests on here. We had Blue, Cami, and Judithe on the show with us, and they are here to return. So we are going to get started. So we're going to just chop it up a little bit real quickly. But again, our goal is to educate the Black and Brown community. And again, thank you for joining us on the couch. So as we go along, let me bring in my fellow co-hosts here. Hey, Mark, how you making out today? How's things going? Anika, how are you?
Good morning. All is well. All is well.
All is well, but like you were saying earlier, the key word in North Carolina, and I know Cami and the other guests will agree, is hot, because it's definitely been hot, and we had some issues here in the building at daytime, so we've actually been shut down. So we're actually open by appointment only and trying to get things going and all along those lines, because we had to get some things fixed, because the buildings like to not always cooperate with weather either. So sometimes the hot weather, they'll get into their mood also. So buildings have a mind of their own, and they don't always like hot weather either. So we're doing some changes and trying to get some adjustments to that. But I just know that I went out one time, I think it was about 2 or 3 days ago, one of them super hot days we had and everything. And it gives you new respect for what the ancestors went through, because they were out there in the fields and everything like that.
That's right.
And it was like, I think 105, 106 degrees, or felt like temperature, and all in that space. And like I said, it always gives you mad respect for the ancestors when you see what they've got to deal with, and we're dealing with this with air conditioning. They didn't necessarily have air conditioning.
Exactly. I agree with you. Let's see. On Juneteenth, I went down to Texas. And let me tell you something. Texas is a different type of heat, right?
Yeah.
As you go from Texas on down, it is different. And like you, Mark, I praise our ancestors. I don't see how they did it, but I know a lot of them did pass out, die in the field, and they didn't care. They just pulled them out and just made the rest of them work. But listen, big ups to all of them, because there's no way on God's green earth I would do it. And even in this present day, as things are changing, listen, take me out, lock me up, because I'm not pulling nobody cotton. I'm not doing it. I'm not. I will be the worst person they ever had. They'll be like, look, just put her away. Yep, please do, because I'm not going to work. This heat in the South, sometimes it's just undescribable. But I'm going to tell you the truth. I love summertime. I'm sorry. I do. And welcome to all 3 of you back on the couch. Thank you for returning. Cami, Blue, and Judith, thank you so much. So today we're going to delve into a tough topic here, which we kind of talked about a little bit 2 weeks ago when we all were on the couch before. And again, we were talking about trauma, okay, post-traumatic slave syndrome. We're actually going to get into this discussion today. What is trauma and multi-generational trauma? So I encourage everybody to get into this roundtable talk, because that's what we're getting ready to have, okay? So let's talk about trauma, everybody. How do we define trauma?
background noise with somebody.
Yeah, it's background noise. I don't know who it is. Okay, there we go. I think I got it. Okay. So how would we describe trauma? How would you define it?
I mean, a lot of people have to go through trauma on a regular basis, and we all have trauma in one form or fashion in our lives and all along those lines. So, I mean, the trauma can be anything from the trauma you go through in certain kinds of abusive relationships and things along those lines, but it can also be just the trauma of day to day life because we all face trauma on a day to day basis to some degree or another, and all along those lines. And of course, we've all heard about the notion, which is very common in relationships, and I know that Cami is familiar with it, as well as some of the others that are in this field of trauma bonding, where you kind of like try to identify with those that have gone through problems and all along those lines, and sometimes you might even give them a little bit more leeway than they deserve, and you kind of like bond and wind up giving them a little bit more sympathy than they need, and all in that space. And then sometimes you wind up being the victim as much as the other person.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Anyone else? Trauma. How would you define it?
An event that happens in your life where it has an effect on you and it may affect your growth. Just me being a trauma survivor with different things that I have gone through. Sometimes when you see a lens, you have a lens and you see something, it's hard to unsee. So moving forward in life, you compare it. So it gives you this response. And some people say, well, you're acting like somebody's out to get you. It's not that I feel that someone's out to get me. I have seen this same behavior before. And then what happens is once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then that adds on to that. Then it's a repeat. So then you're guarded because now that you have had it happen to you 3 times or more, you don't trust. So that could be the trauma. And what people say is you are not your trauma. But when you're faced with the repeated action or situations, it affects you internally.
Yeah. Hey, just really quickly, and I was kind of teasing earlier when we came on, but trauma can be something that can be very serious, like the trauma of relationships and what we go through in relationships. It can also be the trauma of bullying. One of the shows that I do on Pod TV deals with the whole notion of kind of the cloth of bullies and all along those lines, and to recognize bullying and some of their characteristics like narcissism and other things along those lines and everything. But sometimes the trauma can be something very simple. I know some people that are traumatized, and we were actually joking about it because I was mentioning it happened here in North Carolina when they see things in their house that can impact them, whether it's like a rat in the house or a bug in the house that you don't want to see in the house, or as I was telling you ladies earlier, the people that went there in Cary and they were going to get a burger and they found a snake on the windowsill. I'm sure that created some trauma in their life and everything because they were probably sitting there going like, wait a minute, I don't know how I'm going to cope with this. And that probably created some trauma in their lives. I can only imagine what kind of mental impact that might have had on those people that saw that snake, particularly if they have a phobia around snakes. And we do know that some people have phobias around certain animals and all along those lines.
Trauma is like a shock to the body. It's like when you're jumping your car. That's the way I see trauma.
Something that impacts you in a way that hurts you.
I agree.
Yes.
But and I, like I was saying, I do agree. It can be simple. I know, like offhand, I smell my food before I eat it, and just thinking about trauma and my reason behind it is because there was one time I went to a restaurant, and as I was about to eat a piece of fruit, I smelled that it went bad. I ended up taking a bite. So ever since then, before I put anything in my mouth, I smell it. So for me, like trauma can be any event and any situation that has occurred that was a shock to the body. So then we safeguard ourselves to protect from that possibly happening again.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Blue.
Okay. Blue.
I mean, I think I pretty much, captured the whole gist of it. I mean, so many definitions because trauma is so many different ways. I remember somebody was comparing traumas, and they're just trying to minimize somebody's trauma because what they went through probably didn't look like a typical response or a typical antecedent for trauma. But everyone's trauma, depending on how it impacts them, is just as relevant as someone else's. It's just if we could see the same thing and have a different reaction to it just based on our background, our culture, our education. And if it impacts us and it's traumatic to us and it impacts the way we navigate this world, then it is still trauma. Like, well, why, how did that affect you like that? Why is that still impacting you this many years later? Every time I hear the word hurricane, I'm still impacted. What happened to my family during Hurricane Hugo, and that was well over 30 years ago.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Hey, Dr. Diamond, in that same relationship to what Blue was saying about Hugo, and I do remember Hugo, and I was actually just having a conversation with my mom about the hurricanes because we're in the middle of hurricane season and all on those lines. And somehow, when I speak house trauma, I managed to sleep through a hurricane. It might have been Bertha, and Mom still teases me about that to this day and everything. But I'm thinking about, because you in the introduction mentioned our black and brown brothers and sisters and everything like that. And I'm thinking that to them, some of the things that are traumatic might not be as traumatic to us because we're so used to it and everything like that. But something that can be very plain can be very traumatic to somebody that is of a brown complexion, particularly that everything, and I'm just going to get political here right now, that ICE is doing and everything. So if you see a white van, to us it's just a normal white van, but to somebody that is of a Hispanic nature and everything along those lines, that could be very traumatic because in their mind, they might be thinking that that's ICE coming to get them from their job or from their home and everything like that. And we might just see it as a simple white van and all along those lines. So trauma can have different consequences based on people's views of what's going on and how it impacted them and all along those lines. And even with the law enforcement and everything like that, I can only imagine when the people in California see a person of the military background, and we like to salute and definitely honor those that are in our military and everything like that. But to somebody that is of Latin American background, if they see somebody in an army outfit that's National Guard, that might be traumatic to them because they're still, once again, that's somebody that's coming to pick them up. Because like I said, it can be something very simple. Like, how often do you see, just in Cam and Blue here in North Carolina, how often do we see white vans here in this area, or even in New Jersey, where our Dr. Diamond, where everybody else is located at? A white van is very common, but to somebody of Latin background, that can be traumatic.
Right. I agree. It can be traumatic, and due to the climate that we're in right now, everyone is hypersensitive, right, in different ways. For those that are hypersensitive to the fact that ICE is going to come get them, please notice that you see the reduction of those that are the I would say Ecuadorian, Mexican. You will notice that it's diminishing. You don't see them working like they used to. Okay. The first thing I noticed that it has decreased because they are hiding at home. They don't want to be exposed, and that is traumatic for them. For all we know, other than being just under a bed, could they be hiding somewhere? Think about back in the day, and again, we're going to be spinning this all the way back to post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? Where we're going, and thank you, Mark, because you've taken me to that place because that's where we're going to go. Now, if we compare the two, what were our folks doing? They were running, and then they went to stations. They went to underground railroad stations to hide, to get to the next place. Because who was coming after them? The patrolmen. So, which is now equated to the police officers today, right? And now look at ICE. It is history repeating itself. So can you imagine what the Hispanic or our brown community is actually going through? That actually now can truly identify with what our ancestors went through. Am I right or wrong? Anybody can jump in here.
Yeah,
what do you think?
Yeah. And I'm going to just say, because my son was raised in the gym.
You're right. Like,
oh, someone else is talking. I apologize. I'll let our guest go.
Go ahead, Judith.
Go
I
ahead.
think you kind of behind us.
Go ahead. You can go first.
Okay, thank you.
But no,
I
I
was
was
just going
saying
to say that.
I can definitely relate. Because like my family, you know, we were born in Haiti, and so my parents don't speak English. Now, although they have their citizenship, but I'm still scared for them, especially with my dad. You know, him going to work. If he get pulled over, what's going to happen? Is the language barrier going to make them have the assumption that he is here illegally and just take him away, and then we have to have all these documentations to prove? Are they going to believe us when we say like, hey, he's supposed to be here? So that fear every time that my dad goes out. My mom not so much because she's a homebody, but I am fearful of my dad, and I to the point where I'm like, hey, you need to make sure you have all your documentations with you, just in case, because you don't speak English, so they're gonna make the assumption.
Mm-hmm. And he's a Black man, okay? But they, at this point right now, it appears that they don't care.
Go ahead.
I just see
He is a Black
in
man.
New York that happened also, that they just randomly picked this Black guy up and he's saying, I'm American, they didn't care, they just put him in the car. So is it a possibility that we all can experience
and imagine
that?
if he had the language barrier.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Toy, I know you wanted to go. Go ahead, Toy.
Yeah, I was just basically stating from my family of origin, and they're from Mississippi. And when I say it was Princess Columbia, and when I went to visit there last year, it still looks the same. And honestly, I remember, you know, walking to a store and they'll say, "Can I help you, ma'am?" So I'm thinking from the north, that means that can I help you? No, the sarcasm meant that you may be watched when you walk in the store. So you notice that your family pulls you close and you may not patronize that particular store. So there were certain places when you visit, you wouldn't go to. So now me in my 40s, when I visited, it was like a time warp. And I felt like I was still a 7-8-year-old child. Still looks the same. You know how they call it the ABC store, after a certain hour is dark.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much endure. We had a store, it was called Progress. So you could walk there, but it was in all our family. So that means there was a general store. We would walk there, we would not go into town. So now I'm thinking, why did they not go into town? Because it was more, you needed something, go there, not drive far, but you go to this little store. You support your Black owned business. So for me, just seeing that, and the ma'am, that's what I was trying to say. The ma'am was something that when I heard that up here, I don't really care for the word ma'am, because that could be sarcasm, right? When you say, hey, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Here, as I grew up, I was reluctant to say those words. So I was conditioned without even knowing, because they migrated and came to New Jersey. My aunt, who's my grandmother's eldest child, came to New Jersey, and then they followed suit. A house was purchased. They lived there and then went on. So that's where, for me, was hard, because I saw it and I knew what to do. So now if I'm here in New Jersey and if I'm reluctant, that's a trauma of mine, because I heard stories. People were lynched. You can see where the plantation homes are. And then also from what was told in my history, we had land, because one of my great-grandparents is half white. So from there, you see my grandmother had long hair. She looked Indian. So for me, look at me. And then I know that my father, I came out light-skinned, but I look like him. So that was something that I know my father didn't claim me initially. However, he was was young. So that's where I retained this somewhat of a complex, not knowing. And then as a person that's light-skinned, then getting a master's at such a young age, 23, people look at you. So I became a people pleaser due to that. And that was a trauma. So that's something where you carry it. And then through this, meeting you, and then as far as evolving with education and then different experiences, then I can see that why I act the way I act. So I always say every day is a school day, but those are the first initial traumas for me was on a cultural level, by the way I looked.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I'm curious to know, before we watch Dr. Deguri talks about the impact of slavery, did everyone know on this podcast, and then later on, hopefully our guests that are listening, about post-traumatic slave syndrome? And if you knew about it, how did you find out about it?
I'll start. For me, I think I want to say that I was looking at depression and Black men, right? And so for me, I was just trying to make sense of it. And I happened to come across a YouTube video, right? And she was talking about it. And then I listened to the video, and I was like, wow, because when we talk about trauma, right? Trauma it has variations, right? It could be a single event, it could be a repetitive event, or it could be even more complex. That could be an event that has occurred over a longer period of time. And so I was thinking about, and I feel like this was actually kind of during a group that I was a part of. We were talking about parental practices and how they had impacted our childhood. And I was thinking about mental health in the Black community. And when I saw her, I don't know what it was, but a podcast or a speaking engagement, and she was talking about the connection. It may have been even a TED talk. I just don't know. But I just know I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And we don't often give meaning to our experiences. We always talk about Black folk are resilient, Black folk are strong, Black folk not surviving anything. But why are we able to do that? And so just kind of learning about her work really just took me down this rabbit hole of just trying to understand how our historical experiences have impacted our present behaviors and coping mechanisms.
Great. Yeah.
Before I knew about it, I had an inkling about it. I had an understanding about it, just the way that my family moved, where when we might have went to school in Charleston, South Carolina, or we spent summers in Dillon, South Carolina, and how there was a stark difference about the way our grandparents and our aunts and our cousins, our uncles moved versus the way we moved when we were in the city, and like certain things that the areas they wouldn't go to, or how they reacted or how they interacted with people of white complexion. And it was just like stark contrast how our grandmother or our aunt would tell us, well, don't look at them directly. Make sure you do this, this, and that when you go to that store. And I'm like, well, we don't move like that. We go to the store, we pay our money, we go about our business. We don't have to show those certain level of, I don't know, tiership respect. And it just throwed us like those 2 months or 2 to 3 months that we would go there in the summer. It was just like, ew, like, in the 1930s or 40s, because Dillon was very segregated. I want to say they had segregated schools well into the 90s. You know what I'm saying? They have two distinct cities. Dillon itself is mainly white, but Black people live there, and then Newtown, which is all Black. So there was this like a city that was torn by segregation. So I had an inkling of that, like how our maybe generation after generation, how it might have came down. Like Camille said, the generational thing, how we discipline our children. I don't think any African nation back in the day whipped their children. That was colonialism. Us spanking our children is probably linked to slavery or colonialism, something that's come down through the ages. And I think it had to stop somewhere, and it stops with us.
Yeah, I agree with that. Can you mute your mic? Can whoever? Thank you. Go ahead, Anika.
Okay. All right. So I honestly can say, like, I just think that I only know or heard about it through stories of my grandparents that they would tell, that would go on. Like when my grandfather, he was in the military, he was in war, they were treated differently for their jobs and stuff like that. Me personally, where I live, do I see it? I see that people are trauma bonded with the elderly, the way they act. Not so much in the younger generation, but so much, with the elderly people. because they went through it. So you would know by the way that they were trauma bonded, the way that they were treated, that was shock to their souls. So that's why they act the way they do. And that's the only type of experience that I could see, or knowledge that I have about it, is just from the past, from what they experienced.
Thank you. But you saw it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, and sometimes it came in different ways and all along those lines, because you might have somebody that was dealing with it in the sense of like things that came after slavery, like sharecropping and things along those lines. So you have people that were getting caught up in things that were post slavery and post Reconstruction and all along those lines, and it impacted even some of the things that were developed, whether it was Black Wall Street or whether it was a number of other things. Because I can tell you that sometimes you even ran into folks and all along those lines that would surprise you, and all in that space. Because I remember one time me and some friends went with some friends of mine that were musicians, and they had the dreads and all along those lines. And I remember stopping in a store. I think we were going to perform in Ohio, but we might have stopped in West Virginia. It wasn't a deep South state or anything like that, but they were doing a raffle, because I think they were surprised to see us in that area. And you'd be shocked what they were raffling. They were literally rifling off a sawed-off shotgun and everything along those lines. So you can imagine us being at that time a young African-American gentleman and everything like that, what kind of impact that would have when you go into a store and you see this kind of contest and everything along those lines. And that was the grand prize. And, our attitudes around guns, and particularly around some of the guns tied to Confederacy. So that's a form of what we're talking about in terms of this post-traumatic reaction.
Slaves. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Okay.
So I've run through it with Camille. She had told us about it, and I have been listening to her. And two of the things that she said that resonated with me was one, when the little kids were in the bank, and how the black kid had to stick right by the mom when the little white boy or little white kid was just running around playing. And I thought about my experience as as a kid, when I go to the store with my parents, where was I? And I realized like I was right near them, because to me it's because they didn't trust that I wasn't gonna go get anything for them to buy. But now I'm like, it could be the possibility that they were really scared that I could get snatched at any given time, or something bad could happen because of what they've known and what they grew around. And I was that parent that would give the kid a stare, because it's like, wait a minute, where are you going? Like, I know you saw your parents telling you not to go anywhere. I was that mom, but I'm also the mom that allows my kids to explore, to go to the store, because I want to break that cycle. I want her to feel that she can be a kid. And then the other part that resonated with me is how we identify, like we're still segregated even when we're free in the hood, where you will see predominantly Black. But when they see white people start coming into their neighborhood, they're scared. They're scared of the fact that, okay, now they're coming in. What are they going to do? Are they going to take over our neighborhood? And I had even in, I reside in Charlotte, and I remember going to a conference where they were presenting on how they were upgrading a neighborhood, how it was bad, it was in the hood, and all of the things that they were doing upgrades and fixing the homes, and they put everyone in the like shelters and things like that. But then at the end, she talked about how they had to qualify to move back into their neighborhood. And all of the ones that they removed wouldn't qualify. You couldn't have a criminal background. You had to make a certain amount of money to move back. So you removed them with the expectation that you were helping uplift their areas. But now, once you finish, they can't live there no more. So of course, the next time they see one white person coming into their hood or two coming in, their next thought is like, okay, they're trying to push us away. They're trying to take over.
Mm-hmm.
So when she was talking about it, and I'm like, it is based on what's happened to us and the fear of, okay, what are they gonna do next? That's slavery, because that's what they did. They took over. It's their world. We're just living in it, and whenever they want to come and take it, they can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed. Those are our realities, that they can come and take it whenever they want to. So before I get into our quick clip on her, I learned about PTSS based on the fact that I was doing my dissertation, but I always was that person to delve into Black history. But, you try to figure out, why do we act a certain way? Because we're conditioned in different ways, right? And things are passed down to us. But when I was able to understand it from the level of Dr. DeGurry's research, it made more sense to me when I was doing my intra-racial discrimination with Black women, because I needed to understand, where does this conditioning come from that another person can dislike another person based on the shade or the hue itself. So it gave me an in-depth view where I too was watching her on YouTube, but I had bought her book and I read it from cover to cover. And there were times I had to put the book down because I started getting really ticked off because of what she was saying. It's horrible that it was plotted against us so meticulously that it was down to if it was like a grain of salt, they went that far down to make sure that they destroyed us for generations. And guess what? It's happening and it's continuing to happen. However, I'm starting to see a conversion of people are starting to wake up to certain behaviors. So there's a divine order that's happening here, that now it's time for everybody that is a different hue to wake up and see what's really going on. And now that we have this person sitting in that White House, he's given us more to look at to begin to unify. So I'm going to play her clip real quickly. Then we're going to talk about it. Then I do have a question about post-traumatic slave syndrome, a direct question about it, but I want us to delve into what she's saying, and then we're going to discuss what she's saying. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to share the screen so everyone can see. Okay.
Let our soft, gentle curve gently care for all of yours. The Dove Beauty Bar, made with 1/4 moisturizing cream, nourishing without stripping your skin. The Dove Beauty Bar, shaped by your beauty since 1957.
I'm about it, no doubt. So dope, everybody watch out. Bring the heat, we light up the beat.
And see, America's dissonance is we have a country that has prided itself on democracy, on send us your poor, you're tired, you're huddled masses yearning to breathe free, one nation under God. And all of those great, wonderful pronouncements would be great if at the same time you weren't enslaving African people and committing genocide against indigenous people. How do you reconcile that conflict? And again, here's the thing that's so deep. They say, well, it's so upsetting and troubling. We can't teach African American history. We can't. Well, it's history. Okay, first of all, but we can't teach it. It's going to upset the little children. They're going to feel guilty. They're going to, be cowering in the corners. Well, my niece recently, this is very recently, that, the last year or so, her job was to go around the state of Oregon, and share history. And she shared the history of Thomas Jefferson, oh boy, and, Phyllis Wheatley. And then she would give them these questions afterwards. And one of the things that Thomas Jefferson said was that Black people weren't smart and could not be creative. They could not produce art. Right. These are the things that he said, and in my presentations, of course, I show things that really, really contradict that whole idea. But she asks her students, these are sixth grade, predominantly white students. She asks them, why do you think Thomas Jefferson might have said that Black people weren't smart and couldn't be creative? And one of the kids said, well, when you objectify people, it's easy to look at them as lesser than you. Another one said, because if people thought that Black people were smart and Black people were creative, then they wouldn't want to make them slaves.
Right.
And then that would lose him a lot of money. Right. Another one said, well, he's racist. The other one said, over and over again, I said, do these sound like children cowering in a corner, afraid? No, they're clear. And they're not going to adopt those perspectives of their parents. That's why they don't want it taught. What's Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, all of it. And so when you think of that, if we're eliminating Rosa Parks,
come on, you
think I'm going to let you talk about American chattel slavery, the rape, the pillage, the destruction of people, the experimentation, all of those things?
Yeah.
No, but this is the truth. And I believe that truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtue. Without truthfulness, you cannot attain the other virtues. You have to first tell the truth.
Yeah.
And that's fundamental as an educator, as a clinician. When people come to me for therapy, when I was, doing one-on-one therapy, inevitably they'd come with a presenting problem. Well, it's my 14-year-old. She's acting out. And I'll start there, but there's always a secret. Mm-hmm. And the secrets make us sick.
I want you to get into this because even when you talk about in the book, which your book is on the banned book list.
Yeah.
Your book, you can't put this in the schools.
Oh, no.
And I was telling my sister, I was like, I think we need to make our book club a banned book club because we have to be able to make sure that our children, that our friends, that our cousins, that our sisters know this information because it's hiding right in plain sight.
Yes.
Because you talk about the secrets keeping us sick, and how many of us, when we look back from a cultural lens, right, at our own lives and our own families, and we see how sickness and disease plagues Black people at alarming rates. And you really give voice to that because you talk about, we can look at Harriet Washington's medical apartheid. You talk about the experimentations. I want you to talk about how we have allowed the secrets to keep making us sick.
So one of the things that I did is I began to, my family is from Louisiana. My father only went to the 6th grade.
The Asiatic Black man.
Asiatic Black man. He was serious. My dad, but my father used to he'd make this statement. He'd say, if a white man has a cold, then the Black man has pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so part of the injury, the assault on Black people is them beginning to believe some of the myths. The other thing is to understand, because inevitably someone always asks me, they go, well, how do I understand? How do you connect connect slavery with contemporary African-American behavior? I said, how can you not?
How can you not?
How can you not? 339 years of trauma and survival and adaptation. You learn how to survive in hostile environments, and surviving isn't always pretty. It isn't always pretty, but it's very functional. So I have to give examples of how that shows up. So one of the things I do in my audience is I'll say, well, if I shoot this person that's on the front row, is everyone in agreement that they're traumatized?
Yes.
And everyone goes, yeah, I think we can go with that.
Yeah.
Right. I said, all right. So now the person that's seated next to the person that's shot, they too are traumatized because they saw it. Someone in the hall hears the shot, later finds out who it is. They're traumatized. They call the person who's been shot. They call their family that are in Oklahoma and tell them what's happened. They're traumatized. Now, at the same time, you may have someone that's just maybe one aisle away that saw the whole thing. They're interviewed. Well, what happened? Oh, it was awful. There was blood everywhere and it was so sad. When's lunch? Not traumatized. So everyone's not traumatized by a traumatic event because we have a differential response to stressors as human beings. But we talk about slavery. We're not talking about a single stressor. We're talking about lifetimes of stress and trauma. Lifetimes. It is not plausible that you can escape that with no injury.
Right.
Now, we are all familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And what happens to people. Exaggerated startle response, right? Difficulty falling and staying asleep, feeling of foreshortened future, triggers based on things that resemble the original event. All of these things happen by a single trauma that could be experienced directly, like the person shot or the person that got the phone call in Oklahoma. You follow me?
Yeah.
All of them could end up with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder requiring medication and people talking to them softly twice a week. Right? You weren't even there.
Right.
So what do you think happens when you have been there and you have been borne the brunt of that? Right? And then people go, well, then didn't y'all get free? Oh, yeah. So now let's do the math. 339 years of trauma. Get any help with that? When, and again, this is difficult to hear, but when someone decides that your 8-year-old, they're going to pass around to the evening men because that's their proclivity. Or they take your wife or your friend, or they sell your baby from your arms. Did we get any help for that? Right. Was there any therapeutic assistance? No, not for 339 years. We did the best we could to heal under hostile environments. And then you got freed. Great. Any help then? What, anybody have any data that suggests that we said, well, we know it's been deep. We know, we've sold away your family. We've beaten and lynched people. Let's do some group therapy. No. Nobody showed up.
Nothing.
Nobody showed up. So now 339 years of trauma, no help. Freed, no help. Did the trauma continue?
Absolutely.
You bet it did, all the way up to 2025.
Hey, Vault family, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this clip, make sure to
Okay. So you heard what she said about how it goes from one generation to the next. And she said 339 years. And then you get to hear people do say stuff like, well, slavery is over. Okay. Is it a problem? So here's the question. How does post-traumatic slave syndrome echo through generations, shaping behaviors, beliefs, and emotional responses? This is our roundtable question. So you heard what she said. What will be your answer here? What are we talking about?
I just learned, and I don't want to be the only one speaking, but it triggered me in some ways. And April, you know my story. You've been there when I shared my story and I didn't share. And as an aspiring author, and it's just to the point of, as Anika had put in one of our earlier shows, she had to speak to the family. And I've been speaking to my family about sharing. And as I explained to you, so now you understand why sometimes someone doesn't want to respond. And I just, I was triggered not too long ago. Someone says, your energy. I'm like, well, I know this is a hole I'm not going to fall into. And April, you talked to me and I said, I'm not going to fall in this hole. And there was an event after that. And I said, well, you know what? There's a lot going on. I can't respond to that. I'm going to remove myself because I know in the past what I have done is fight, use my fingers, whatever hands. I can't do that because when you get to a position in your life, you don't want to break down everything that you built from the ground up. So what I have learned to do is to respond and not react because I have been through the reactionary. And I'm going to share this. I was at Seton Hall, and I'm going to be honest, because I fought someone and I almost lost my residential to become an RA. That was going to cover. I fought in the student center because a man put someone in my car who was abusive to me. And the girl saw me and she all trying to get, and we had a fight. And I was going to my nursing process class. So I had to wait at the dean of student. Am I going to lose it? She didn't show up. Back then, we didn't have receipts. We probably didn't have video. But I prayed to God. I said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay for my housing? for the end of the year. So I had to learn, because what do you get out of that? That was the time that it was in my hands. But through the grace of God, the girl didn't show up. It was wrong because he's gallivanting around the campus with her. He had already busted the windows out of my car.
Oh my God.
Miss Geeston, your windows are out of your car. And I drive down the parkway, the New Jersey Parkway, with no windows. Luckily, my neighbor was Hispanic. They fixed things. And there was other things that I will be writing in my manuscripts. So when someone comes at me, I freeze a little bit because I know what I can say, but I choose not to say because I am not that person. I am not a victim. And when someone tells me to get off a victim bus and all that, I cannot be triggered because I am blessed to come along a long way. And that feeling that triggered, because that was what's instilled in me, because I was with my grandmother and they'll pull you close. So at that time, how can that intergenerational trauma for me? Because in my family, you handle it on site. And why? I am the only one of my father's children who has not been incarcerated, because I'm the smart one. The generational percentage of all the kids, you look at that. I look at statistics. So that's where you have to invest. So now what I'm doing, I'm working with the little ones. I'm teaching my little niece, why does a person feel the need? She's 10 years old. She's bigger. I don't want her to be considered a bully. And has been bullied. So when these people see me, when they don't know me, when I don't say anything, that means I am being smart because I have done the wrong things. And I am an administrator at a mental health agency. I've been providing services for 26 years. I worked with sex offenders. My first biopsychosocial assessment was with a murderer.
Wow.
I have learned how to pinch myself so I don't respond. Because when you walk into his office, I was behind the desk because I was new. We need you to do this. It's New Year's Eve. DOC dropped this individual off. What am I supposed to do? I'm behind the desk. He says, I killed my wife. It was an accident. I'm looking at it. He said I was cleaning my gun. Megan's Law. So when you see me, I cannot respond because this person of my 40-something years has seen a lot. Experienced a lot, and I'm glad we're doing a round table, and I'm going to stop. But I was triggered, and we're going to let everyone else get in.
Okay. I mean, you were triggered, so I hear that. So now I gotta, use your tools to bring yourself down to what actually triggered you in this discussion. It is a hard thing to digest. Like I said earlier too, when I read her book, I had to put it down. That you probably never even thought about, because once she did this research, it gave us an open window to actually what we're going through. It gave it a name. It is not PTSD, it is PTSS for us because it is generational. So again, the question is, does post-traumatic slave syndrome echo through generations? Does it?
Yes, it does.
It go from one to
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Is it present now? Can you see it now?
Hey, Dr. Diamond,
I was talking.
I was telling Blue and Camille. Okay. You said does it exist now? And I was telling Camille and Blue, just yesterday I went to the hospital to visit a member of mine, and I'm watching this white police officer as this lady goes through the metal detective, and how he searched her bag. And but there was one particular bag he did not check that was around her waist. He didn't check it. He just asked her, like, hey, do you have a pocket knife or a pepper spray? And she said no, and he let her go on. And then when I walked through with my badge, he searched my bag, but it was more thorough. And he asked me, do I have any weapons? He didn't ask me if I had pepper spray or a pocket knife, as if it's like, protection of a young lady. He asked me, did I have any weapons? And I thought back about why didn't you ask me the same question? But I also had to respond, as Ms. Toy was saying, and not react to that, how I felt about it. Because had I reacted, then whatever comes next is based on my reaction. We have to sometimes, like hold things back in the Black community, because when we respond, depending on how we respond, will determine what they do next and justify it. So whenever I have sessions with my Black men specifically, and they telling me all these things that their teachers or their supervisor or whomever is doing, although they have justification for being upset and for being angry, my goal to them is you have to be mindful of how you respond, because then their justification is you got angry, you got hostile. So I did X, Y, and Z. It's not even about the fact that they were wrong. Now they have justification of why they were right to do what they did to you. So as a clinician, all I do is teach how to respond to situations, because I know it exists. I have been exposed to racism. I've seen it. So it's not even about like, oh, it doesn't exist. Is you have to respond differently.
Right.
I'll speak to that. I think yes. Your question is, does it show up? Yes, it shows up in all that we do. That is why we all have visceral reactions. A prime example of what that looks like is everybody seen the show Blackish, right?
Yes.
Do y'all remember that episode when they talked about Obama becoming president? And I remember when Obama became president, we all were like, who's going to try him? Who's going to try to take him out?
Mhm.
I remember I remember every person I talked to was like, hey, man. And I'm like, yo, somebody going to take him out. When he's waving his hand down. And then Blackish did an episode that spoke to that experience. We were all excited and happy that a Black man had made it into the White House, but we were so concerned that he was going to die. Because we already know what it's like when a Black man gets in a position of power, and how what ends up happening is they try to take him out. And so when we talk about that post-traumatic, it is how we behave. When you were just talking about Judith, and when you were talking about Toya about like how you respond to certain people in certain environments, like even down to like when we go into grocery stores, we're looking to see who's following us. So I do feel like these behaviors, these almost embedded kind of belief systems that we have are rooted in slavery experiences. And I will say that, like, for me, as she was talking, it got me to thinking about, and I don't want to bring up new stuff, but there's an article by Tima Okun called The White Supremacy Culture, which talks about how white supremacy actions that began in slavery that have been embedded in our culture and how we respond. Like, for instance, the idea of us taking time to rest, right? We were sitting here when we started this conversation, we were talking about working in the fields. Black people, we always moving. When we not moving, you lazy. You need to get something, right? You know what I mean?
It's lazy.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just like we have taken on these belief systems as a form of coping to deal, and it really is a form of survival too, right? Because at the end of the day, the root of it is survival. We had to mask our pain. We had to mask our joy. We had to mask our rest in different forms to survive.
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Cami, the flip side of that though is really interesting, because even on this network that I'm part of, Pod TV and everything, I've seen people that are of fellow minority backgrounds and everything, be they Asian or be they Latin or be they other groups that are in there, and they will, and you kind of brought it up earlier, Toya, and everything, this notion of being the victims ourselves and all along those lines, because they'll throw out that victim mentality at us in a heartbeat and kind of like have this notion of, why are y'all still playing victims? Slavery was 200, 300 years ago and everything like that. And we know that that's nonsense, because like we all talked about on this show, the impact is still there and everything, whether it's the impact that came through the fields that we go into, and even the impact. And I know that Dr. Diamond, your husband, because I do a podcast with him as well, is in the criminal justice system and everything like that. So the impact that it's got on our criminal justice and all along those lines, and that impact. So it directly impacts us, but they will claim in a heartbeat, including some of our fellow black and brown people, that we are the being the victims and playing the victim in the situation, and that's not the case at all. We're just identifying what was going on and all along those lines, because we are some very resilient people. All you got to do is look, like many of y'all know, I'm working today at the Heritage Center and everything, and this is one of the parts of Black Wall Street here in Durham, North Carolina, just like there was one in Tulsa and there was one in Rosewood and a number of other places. But we are very resilient people, and all along those lines, and we even find ways to get around the situation, even if it is a harsh situation. I think about Mr. Merrick, who literally was the barber to Mr. Duke, which is the part of the reason, and Mr. Duke being the founder of Duke University, being the reason that they probably gave some money into our community and all along those lines. But we also learned at the as he was cutting his hair, that kind of like learning from the robber barons of the day, because no doubt Mr. Duke was a robber baron, just like the Rockefellers were. But while he's cutting his hair, he's learning some of these business tactics and everything like that. But unfortunately, I can't tell you how many times I have heard people, particularly white folks, and even some people that are fellow minorities, that'll be like, but that was then. That was 100 years ago. Why are you even worried about that? And there's one that one of my jobs is considered to be a historian. I'm going like, if you do not learn from the past, then you are doomed to repeat it. I know it's a cliche, but it's a very true cliche, and all along those lines. But a lot of times we don't want to think about that. We want to think that this is something that doesn't impact us, but we can even see the way that it impacts us in what they gravitate to, and all along those lines. How many times have you driven your car, those of you that drive, and heard some hip hop music or some jazz or some blues, which comes out of our culture, and you are somewhat shocked to see who it's coming from? Because a lot of times it's the white gentleman, that is the white teenager, that is totally identifying with our culture and everything, but they don't want to identify with the pain of our culture.
They want our rhythm, but not our blues. But I want to say something to speak to what you spoke to, Mark.
Yeah.
They don't want Jewish people who went through the Holocaust to be. They're not called victims. They're celebrated. It's honored, right? We're not talking about the Japanese concentration camps. We sell like when they were actually just talking about the bombing of Hiroshima and how they went. The United States did all this. They were victims.
Right.
We shouldn't be doing like when he was talking about what happened with Iran. But all of a sudden, when Black people talk about their stuff, that happened 300 years ago.
Right.
Let's keep in mind, Black people ain't had all their rights for 100 years yet.
Yeah.
Right.
We just got like some type of equality that you have literally seen be dismantled within the last 6 months. Like, come on. So for me, like when people say that, that's a way to dismiss. It's not and devalue our experiences. And here's the thing that's also that people forget. Black populations alone, right? When Jewish people came to America, they were gifted things to be able to build establishments. When Asian Americans come to America, they are gifted things to build establishments. We've been here. What we get?
Nothing.
We ain't got our 40 acres. We ain't got our 40 acres of mule yet.
What about Connecticut? What about Connecticut? They build land and they get money. So on the reservation.
When we try to build our own.
Another way that they justify what Camille was saying, now they can, now they say, well, I had a Black president. So while we were fearing our president, like safety, now it's more justification, like we even had a Black president. So of course slavery is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's definitely part of it. They justify that, and the other thing, which comes back to trauma bond, and all along those lines, and maybe Blue's got some thoughts around this as well as Cami is. They will also point to. Let's be very clear that whether it was in slavery or whether it was in modern day times, some of our worst enemies are not necessarily the people that look different than us. It can be sometimes our own people in our own communities and everything along those lines, because we can definitely have some folks that will add to that narrative that I was talking about and kind of play into that narrative. And we know that even with the Black Wall Streets and things like that, that there was a lot of times it was people in our community that were the true people that were the, I'll just be blunt about it, they were the Uncle Toms, and they bought into the whole system, and they basically helped the destruction of our riches and all along those lines. So we got some people that are very much within our community that are helping to destroy our community. We even see that to this day. I know that there's several friends of mine have this saying, and I know the saying that I think I brought it up on your show before. I know I brought it up with definitely Dr. Diamond's husband and everything. You know, all skin folks ain't necessarily kin folks and everything along those lines, because they can be your worst enemies.
I would encourage
Mhm.
you all to
You
look
know
up
what?
the
Oh,
the theory of negrescence. It talks about the development of racial identity.
Mhm.
And so what ends up happening, even what you're talking about, Mark, was like even people that look like us, our kinfolk and
right.
kinfolk and kinfolk, that ideology is rooted in white supremacy. What did
Mhm.
they do
Right.
they saw us coming together in slavery? Oh no, we're gonna put the light skins in the house. We gonna put the dark skin. You know what I mean? They created that colorism. So
Right.
like all that is still rooted
Mhm.
and in slavery and what we experienced, and then what ended up happening is there's this level of classism and
Mhm.
colorism that is embedded in our culture, so much so that we don't even really recognize it
Yeah.
until we experience it ourselves, or until we begin to do the research and learn more about ourselves. And I'm sorry,
Mhm.
uh
That's
Anakia,
okay,
is it
Anika.
Anakia? You were about
An-
to
Anika. That's okay. You know, I
Anika,
think that
sorry.
no worries, no worries. Um, I was just gonna go back against what Mark said. As far as like the colorism and stuff like that, a lot of us will accept the little crumbs that they give us
Mhm.
just so that we could team up with them,
Right.
and we go against ourselves, our shade,
Mhm.
because we feel like we're getting something, but they people don't realize that we're not getting anything. They're not going to give us anything. They're going to use us to,
Mm-hmm.
to either work for them, do something for them, tell for them, bring them what they need, information for them.
Mhm.
And when we don't do that, that's when we're disgruntled and get over it.
Yeah.
They start
But not
talking.
Right.
even that, yeah, but not only that, but they're going to paint us in such a way in terms of the stereotypes. So how many times have we seen the stereotypes, including stereotypes that we create ourselves of the black youth gang members? And I'm not saying that there aren't gang members and everything like that, but the
Right.
last time I checked, and all along those lines, it takes the power that be in order to get those supplies and those drugs into our community and all along those lines. I don't know about y'all, but I don't know many brothers and sisters that got a plane and the wherewithal to get the material from point A to point B without having some government influence or some other sources that are helping bring it there, because they like to do things to divide us and all along those lines. And the drug war is part of that. There's no real war on drugs because they like to have the drugs in our community to keep us down and suppressed. At least that's my
Absolutely.
attitude.
Absolutely.
Agreed. So
Mhm.
I'm going to sum this all up. I'm taking everybody's points and add my own in this before we move to the next question. Now, with post-traumatic slave syndrome, yes, we become conditioned to do things as you all talked about. So, Mark, you brought up yourself in blue, and I'm going to bring my son in this also, and Toya's son, and anyone else who has a son, that we teach our kids when they learn how to drive. You know what you got to do? Put your hand on the steering wheel, look forward, wait for them. Don't make any sudden moves. Make sure you're not flinching or anything like that, because they'll blow your head off. And I'm just going to be straightforward here, because we're real about our stuff on this podcast. So they will blow your head off, period. Second, George Floyd is an example of modern day lynching. We all watched that man killed him. Do you know that traumatized us watching that?
Mm-hmm.
We went through trauma in that moment, right there in that moment, because we are feeling his life slip away from him. And we're watching this, okay, in live TV. This man is killing him. He didn't care about what the other people were saying. You notice that the white lady walked up to him, who was a paramedic, and said, "You are killing him. You're suffocating him." Did he care? No, he kept going. Meanwhile, the Black community is being traumatized. So what happens to us in the community again? Okay, we got to watch what we say. We better not move a certain way. Maybe, and then you got here we go. Every skin color, we just said that every folks ain't, all the skin colors ain't kinfolk. What did he do? Why is it on him? Why isn't it on the officer? How come the officer is not the person that initiated the hostility, which we've all seen before? Your skin becomes an automatic hostile situation. And that's what we go through on a day-to-day basis, especially our Black men. Breonna Taylor was killed in her home based on the assumption of her boyfriend, who lived across town, wasn't even at her house, but they kicked her door in and they justified her killing. Why? Because she's not seen as a person, nor was George Floyd. The Black Holocaust, that was our Holocaust. We are able to talk about it just like the Jews are, okay? No disrespect to them, but I am sick and tired of them saying we can't talk about our Holocaust. First of all, white folks, your ancestors decided, oh, look at those Igbo people. Look at these people. Look at their body structure. Let's go get them. They're ignorant. They don't know what's going on. People are going to be traumatized. You shot them. So they see that. Now they're scared to death. Not that they were willing to go, but you got other people that were selling them that look like us into slavery. But they didn't know the magnitude of what was going to happen. So we have our Black Holocaust. Colonialism still exists to this day. From one stage to the next. We can never win, you guys. I don't know about you, but as soon as they give us an inch, they take it back 10 steps back. Because they're like, oh no, wait a minute. It's too many Black women becoming educated. What are we going to do about that? Let's cut programs. Right now. The Department of Education cut programs because they don't want Black women to be successful in being educated. Then we have our Black children behind us because as Black mothers and fathers who are educated, we're going to educate our children. So why not stop it? Let's cut that off. So that is also what we're going through. The Willie Lynch letter, if you never heard of it, please look it up. It breaks down what they did to us and why they did it. And this was written back in the 1800s. Yeah. It is an author that is non-existent, but it is old against young, Black, light skin against dark skin. I mean, it's broken down on how we're going to be conditioned for thousands of years. So they went ahead and they did all of these things. Part of being into the NAACP. If you don't know, here is a known fact that you need to know: that every 100 years we have to reapply as citizens. Okay, so therefore we are still 3/5 of a person. We're still seen as animals. We're never going to be seen as equal by white people because they don't see that. The fear in the fact is this, and I'm going to sum it up just like this. The fear is that we are the beginning of civilization. We are the strength. We are the power. We're everything that they don't have. We are intelligent. They still can't figure out how the pyramids were built because they keep saying aliens built this. No, there were no aliens. There were human beings out here on Earth. So it's impossible for people to do that. But white folks is going to always destroy the power of the Black hand. All right, and the mind and the body. And they don't understand why our body works the way that it does. And this is why we became the experiment. And this is why Black women that have children on this podcast here, you can go in and say, I'm experiencing all of this pain. What do? oh no, that's not really what's happening. How are you going to tell me what's going on with my body? And this is why we had a person like my mom died early. She had went into childbirth, never came back out. Went in and she died. And so did the baby too, right? Because they did not treat her well. Okay, yeah. So that traumatized me. I was afraid to have children. That's why I only have one. Okay, and that took a lot. So look at her trauma and how it went to me. So it does happen, and it's going to continue to happen to us. And how do we break free? All you can do is do your daily healing. But I'm going to tell you right now, we are constantly exposed to trauma in the Black and brown community. We cannot get past it. Our new trauma now is seeing these people being removed and their homes are being broken up. That's the new trauma that we are dealing with. And that will sum up for me the question, behavior, and all of that.
Hey, yes. Dr. Diamond, along those same lines and everything, you talk about that new trauma and colonialism. Colonialism is still out there, it's still very real, and it's still very active even to this day and time. I know we're in the year 2025 and everything like that, and even made a joke about it because he made a joke toward a woman of African descent and all along those lines. And yeah, I'm talking about the person that's currently sitting there in the White House, and he was talking about how that could impact him. But then he made this deal that basically stole, as far as I'm concerned, some of the minerals from the Congo, because the Congo has been involved in this conflict for a number of years. And so that person that's sitting in there in the White House found a way to manipulate it and do a new form of colonialism, because now America's got all of these rights to the minerals there in the Congo, because he negotiated that in order to, quote unquote, end this long time war, and all along those lines, a war that has killed millions of people and was a conflict between the Congo and one of the other authentic African nations, and all along those lines. But he, of course, he figured out a way to manipulate it, and all along those lines. And even with the Black and brown situation and all along those lines, we're now seeing that people, you're talking about Obama, people don't want to accept the fact of this brother, and he is a brother of Muslim descent and a activist, and along those lines, being the possible new mayor of New York because of the color of his skin and his own ethnicity and everything like that. So they're even trying to do that whole divide and conquer kind of thing. So now people are criticizing Obama because Obama hasn't come out and endorsed him, whereas AOC and Bernie has. And I think that eventually he'll come out and endorse him, and all along those lines. But they try to do that divide and conquer thing. They did it then, and they're still doing it to this day, where they're trying to find ways to divide and conquer us.
Yes. Toya?
I just had my hand up because I know you were talking about, I know I'm a little late, but in reference to being, you said shot. And I just thought about it. Now, you remember years ago, they had the little M80s? The little cherry bomb?
Yes.
So I had got shot. I was walking down the street. All I know, this thing popped up my leg, blood coming down. And that thing made a little gash. I still have the mark. So that was one of the things that I had totally forgot about to add to my list. So when I'm jittery, if I hear guns or something like that, I won't go certain places. But all I know is that there was something that burst through my jeans. Saw the blood going down, but it was around 4th of July. I wouldn't want to come out. I don't like to be around fireworks because they were throwing them. They used to throw them in the hood, throw them out the cars. So imagine you're walking down the street, me and my girlfriends. And so the whole summer they called me M80 because I had to wear like little shorts in high school with a little patch on it. So it's just, I forgot about that. I stuffed that so far that I forgot. So it's just, it's like, we're always peeling the onion. So just imagine. Then the other thing about that, my son, I explained to him about Big Brother's always watching. So one day I'm picking up my check for my part-time job, and we're in the car. This girl pulls up to the side of me. She's not my color. And all I wanted to do was get out with a red light. So she was talking junk. So I just rolled my window down. I said, okay. I said to my son and his friend, I said, you see this? You see that camera right there? We're Black, they're white. I said, one thing, you want to get out. My son's popping junk. Why are you talking to my mom like that? I said, I'm not going to do it. I said, but once she gets out the car, then I can. I said, because if I get out the car first, I'm the one that's the aggressor. Right? She talked all this, called me this and that. I was just trying to merge into traffic. I said, she's getting that off because she's in the car. But I was teaching my son then at 8 years old that you do not. And now that there are cameras, they will set you free now. But back then they didn't have that. You are guilty until proven innocent. And there are people who are sex offenders or whatever. They can come out in court. Someone got choked. Why is the person that choked? But this is a person who just possessed a gun. You don't know why, but you understand the difference. I'm in the courtroom listening. I've been in court with a lot of people, Judithe, whatever, Matt, whatever the situation is. But I knew to pass that on to my son because that is what we are living in. A narrative based on the video. So imagine if I would have got out the car. All they would have saw this person of color walking over to this Caucasian woman's car, even though she called me, whatever she called me, but I saw the camera. I always was scared. You don't know if they're working or not. And maybe they do work and they're just telling us. But as you know, I watch a lot of TV One for my man and all that. Because sometimes I'm like, is that really what happens? And you know, they'll find someone with DNA and people will be in jail for 30, 40 years. And then what happens is they put them in the CODIS, if I'm saying it correctly. And what happened is they'll solve a mystery because they got a hit. Because then there was DNA that wasn't processed. And guess who's there? It belongs to the Black and brown community. But someone reprocessed it and they found a person. What do you do for a person? The exonerated 5 this year, our organization had Salam there. We had the actual Yusef Salam, if I'm saying it correctly. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so I told my niece, because she's there, she said, Mom, that really happened. And there's a show. I'm just trying to figure out when she can watch the movie. I'm not sure when, but we culture our kids despite what they teach, because now these are things, it's a split second. If you react, I could have reacted. But the point is, there was a trauma.
What I'm going to say to that is what Cami said earlier. It's conditioning. And what we do is conditioning, but it's also survival. Yeah. We have to survive. And this is what was taught to us by generation. Each generation teaches us how to survive, and we do it too. We have to, because if we don't, we will die. We will die. This society will kill us because of what we look like. And that in itself is what I'm going to go back to what Dr. DeGuri was saying. She said, we do things out of survival, because if we don't, we won't exist here. Because it is what you're saying. If you are the aggressor, even though you're not, the white woman is seen to be meek and mild, where Black women are seen as aggressive. So we are already distinctly shown as different. And although within our family, we can break down who's shy, who's more reserved, who's more assertive, we can break that down within. But we are seen, all of us is seen as aggressive. Every last person on this podcast right now is aggressive. Although we are not doing that. It is simply about protecting ourselves, but they can't see that. It is more that we are going to harm them versus the other way around. So Mark, we'll never get our 40 acres and a mule because we don't supposed to. Right?
Right. The only thing is, and then why do our other women or other men trigger us? You don't know what anyone else has done or gone through. So that's really what we need to talk about eventually, some tools of how to respond. That's what we need to teach, because we have it within our own culture.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing, Toya. I'm going to say this, and this is, any one of you all can jump in with this, right? We can have 1,000 tools. Mm-hmm. And we can calm down, we can do everything. But why do we have to always do that when the other side should consider the fact that you can traumatize someone, you can trigger someone? This is about being socially connected with another person. If I notice your body becomes tense, why do I keep going on and on when I can see it? You are not blind. You can see if a person is reacting to you. That's what I'm talking about here.
But that's bully behavior. That's a bully.
That's not correct. It is a bully behavior. You have also Asian people that are not always very nice to us, but yet we go into your stores. Yet you are surviving in our communities because of our Black folk who walk the streets. They died. They got killed for civil rights. So why do you think you have a store open? See, the thing is, it extends out further than most people are thinking. You know what I mean? They just think about, oh, well, I'm benefiting, but you're benefiting off of our Black folk back. What are you talking about?
And they want to
so
follow
this is what I have said.
Then they want to
What you
follow
say?
you in the store. They don't come in our communities then.
Yes, they do want to follow you in the store. I can remember that happening to my grandmother and I. We went into a store, but you know what my grandmother taught me that day? She walked right back out the store. She said, when they follow you around, and this was an Asian person that did this to us. She followed us around throughout the store, and my grandmother took me right back through. And she said, you never shop at at any store that would treat you the way they're treating you. You're the one spending the money there. It's not the other way around. Because a white person could come in there and they wouldn't even know the person is robbing them blind, but they'll focus on the black person because that's what they see. So again, society or colonialism have put us in a position that we are the most hated. And I'm going to keep it real. We are the most hated. That's a difficult way to be in, or a difficult position to be in. So now, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say along those same lines, and I think I told you this story before, sometimes there are true allies, and sometimes those allies can let you know the situation that you're in even before you realize it and everything. Because I think that I told you before that there was a Chinese store that existed here, an Asian store that existed here, and all along those lines, and it was a group of us at the time that I was working at the Arts Council that went to that particular restaurant and everything like that. And they basically called us everything but the all kinds of negative names, including probably the Asian version of that N word and everything along those lines. But what they did not know was that one of the people that was in the group with us, that was a white woman, and all along those lines, she's still involved in the arts to this day. She spoke Mandarin, so she actually knew what they were saying. And as soon as they said what they said, she basically gathered us all together. And it's like, to much to the point of what your grandmother did. She's like, we're out of here. And they were a lot shocked that they lost a lot of money that particular day because she understood the language and understood what they were saying, and relayed that message to us and let us know that we were not being treated kindly. So sometimes there are true allies in those other communities that will let you know what's going on.
True. That is true. I'm going to move on to our next roundtable question. The next question is, what is multi-generational trauma and how does it manifest within families and who carries it? Multi-generational trauma. So that's one person carrying on the next trauma. So let's think of a trauma that we probably have carried with us in a multi-generational way. So most of us, is it fair to say most of our family are from the South and migrated to the North? Some of us still have family members in the South. Okay, so that happens. They left their trauma. Did they truly leave their trauma? No. And that's all the traumatic things that happened to them now. Did they leave it behind with them when they went up north?
No.
I think what ended up happening is, right, there was a separation. So I do feel like families, and I've heard stories, right, where for me, my family is from Mississippi, right? But I will say, like, my family never really talked about their connectedness to Mississippi. They never talked about their life there. My dad was the youngest, and so he came up when he was about 5. My mom was actually born here. My grandmother came from the South, and she was very harsh. She was very, my mom describes as being very harsh, very kind of wanting to be kind of not perfect, but kind of like having this very classy look. Like she was very much about her presentation. You had to have your hair right. Everything had to be perfect on you. And my grandmother died when I was younger, so I wasn't able to ask her those questions. I really wish I could have. But just thinking about my family and thinking about other families that I've heard where some of them never talk about the South. It's kind of like they swept it under the rug in a sense and started it. But what ended up happening is that it still showed up. And I think we've all kind of have spoken about experiences where it did show up. It shows up in how we show up in the classroom, right? I don't know about y'all. My mother always told me, you gotta work harder. You gotta be 2 times. You gotta, if they're doing great, you gotta be 2 times better. You better show out, making sure. My mom was like, you ain't going outside with no scarf on your head. You got a bonnet on, girl, bye. Get it together. You better look presentable. You better like you got some sense. Talk like you got some sense. don't come out here and just, start. I remember like growing up, because I was where I love books. I love to read and things like that. And I remember the whole thing about, oh, you talking white because you use proper English. You know what I mean? So it was all these different, I think, kind of ways that we learned how to be present, how to show up. It shows up in our food preferences. It shows up in how we commune together. I will even say, like, we almost, in a sense, lost the communal nature by moving up here because we became to be more isolated, more individualistic. I think that, again, like, it just to kind of sum it up, it showed up. It was still there. It was still present, but it showed up in how we lived our lives. And I think that kind of speaks to where a lot of the vision kind of even expanded even more, because we had a sense that we would be free, right? Moving up north. Like it was this land of opportunity in a sense. But what it ended up being really was a land where we only got, again, those crumbs, and we just made the best of what we had, but we still carried that pain. We still carried that fear. We still carried that hurt. We still carried that anger, I'll say, right? We still carry that fierce anger and even sadness and loss of self. Like, we just disconnected ourselves. And I think Black people are at such a disservice with who we are, that I think that oftentimes shows up too in how we are, how we show up for ourselves, if that makes sense.
But thank you for telling me that, Camille. Is your family from Jefferson Davis County?
No, they're from Biloxi.
I know Biloxi. I have family there, and this is where thank you for that confirmation. Because my mom died, young. And so raising, and I had to go every summer by default because I went to Catholic school. So from May, June, then I would go to the other side. But that's the same thing I was told.
Yep.
So now I know, because my aunt is the same way. Why are you doing this? And there was times we would get into it about the presentation.
Yes.
And I believe because they were sharecroppers, I know the plows and things, but we always were like, all right, Tor, go out there and get some bunches of greens or whatever. We cultivated. We had a farm. So you walked up and down the road, but it was more so we were protected. It was Route 78B, the Jacksons. My grandmother's Margania Jackson. So that's why my name is not LaToya. I have a cousin named Michael, whatever. That's why I'm not LaToya. It's just Toya. But, thank you for healing me on that, because now I understand that why I had to get certain types of love from someone else, because they were workers. So basically they had kids. My grandmother had 8 kids. Everybody had a place. And now from there, the exterior. So when you moved here, she worked for Short Hills at AT&T. So I had things, Catholic school, to remove me from that, to cultivate. Oh, here come the white girl. Okay? The white girl. So, thank you for sharing that with me. So now I know why I had that stern forthcoming, because they worked. They didn't have time for the interpersonal loving. You know what to do. I say, don't cut your nose to spite your face.
Yep.
You ain't got nothing positive to say. Why lie when the truth will do? We don't accept no wooden nickels. These were things that were codes that I had to figure out. That's what they said in the fields.
Yep.
Just shut up real quick.
Yep.
Don't do that. So what I'm passing that on? Same thing. Why do you feel the need? That's what I'm mentoring with the youth. Why do you feel the need? So that's what we need to say. Have them questions. So if you ask one of my nephew or niece, they'll say that. I said, what's govern yourself? Oh, always be prepared or something like that. I'm teaching them young. Because now when they're getting bullied, and not to go off on a tangent, I'm gonna be quiet. My nephew, we didn't send him to school the last 2 days because he got into a fight, suspended right before school. So they didn't go the last 2 days. If the school is done, you already know, because there was 8 kids in the bathroom. My bonus nephew never been in trouble. Where was the teacher? Why would you let 8 boys be in the bathroom wanting to fight? So finally he said, bump that. Oh, that's my guy. But why did you take a quiet kid for him to finally fight? Because there was a lack of watching these children.
That's true.
You weren't doing what your job. So guess what? He did not go to school. So he would be suspended for when he got back to school. What did they do when you get in trouble with the bad day at school? You can be suspended day 1.
For all folks that come from the South, yes, I agree with you both. There are things that we learn to do and how to operate and survive in the city. And we just have to remember they had to adapt to the city life also.
Yeah.
Because my grandparents came all the way to New York, but they also did the communal lifestyle too, because other family members that came from the South would live with them for a period of time. Then they would go out home. Also with speaking, there were 2 different dialects, and we didn't know that when we were growing up, that we were speaking Gullah in the house. And then when we were out in the community, we were speaking what we would say, whatever your New York dialect is. But we were always questioned, and I'm talking about myself and my cousins and whatnot. One day we had a consensus about that. We said, do you have people coming to you and say, well, why do you speak that way? And you're like, well, we're from New York. This is the way we speak. No, we didn't know that we were taking on a dialect, but we were also learning traditions and things like that as well, that we learned from being in the South as well. And Cami, I'm gonna tell you this, my grandmother was notorious for saying, you go out there with your pajamas on or a scarf on, and she was not the person that will hit you. It's her eyes that will harm you. Okay. So I didn't do anything. That was you try it. That's all she'll say. Just try it. And it's like, okay, but you realize that because again, they were watched so closely in South Carolina that yes, there are certain ways you're going to have to walk out of this house, act, behave, so on and so forth. So I agree with you about that. She was very stern in that way. Presentation means everything, because that's what it was. Even down there, that presentation means a lot. So it's how you carry yourself. And education is important. So that was also something that was also, presented. Just be educated. But on the flip side, survival. How do we survive? Cooking law. Stage for everyone eats. I think that was how she was programmed. She grew up in a large home of 12. So, and then she had 10 of her own with my grandfather. So she was still programmed to, you're going to eat what I cook because it's healthier than what you will eat out there, right? Into the community. So there was a lot of things that was given to us, but I don't think we even realized that they carried these things with them and not speaking of the past. So that is where I really want to go about disconnecting from the past pain and hurt. It was not to give it to us, but indirectly we did get it. Not that we wanted it, but we did get some of their depression, possibly anger, on how we react to people, because it's based on how they're reacting. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that, but I know that that's what we got indirectly.
Yeah, I think what's important to note, and we've kind of said this throughout, is it's a survival, right? We're in this mode of survival, right? But we never were thriving. We were just surviving. And there's a difference. Survival is you make the best of what you got and you do what you do. But thriving is flourishing and growing. And I don't think we've ever really been able to just freely do that, to freely just thrive. And I think we are in a space now, as we're talking about our pain, as we're talking about our mental health, as we're talking about these conditioning behaviors and attitudes, that we are kind of pushing ourselves into that realm of thriving. But we've been in this kind of, I remember my therapist said, you're an autopilot, and it's it. Like when you're an autopilot, you're just trying to get through the day. You're just trying to get through. And I think that's how we have that. I think that's what our ancestors did. I think when we migrated up north, we were just trying to get through and get free and get safe. And that was it. And so once we got to a space where we could be safe, we still were concerned. We still kind of had this, like we talk about the ICE people, the ICE coming out for people. Yes, they may be at home, but they still not safe. They still not safe. We were up north, but we still weren't safe.
That's right.
And weren't safe, and part of the other problem is that for a long time, and I think that it still exists to this day, you had a lot of it wasn't just class and the colorism, but there was a lot of division in the methodology, and I'll just leave it at that, and the way of what success meant, to kind of like what you're saying, Cami, and everything. Because I know that even in my own family, and everything, you had that whole argument between how far did you want to go down the assimilationist path and how far did you want to go down that thriving path and that path of self-empowerment. Because I know that my own dad was very much into the self-empowerment, but I had some other relatives, including my grandmother and definitely probably grandfather, that were more in the assimilationist kind of path and everything like that. So that argument and that conversation, unfortunately, even in the year 2025, is still going on, where we're trying to figure out what safety looks like and what that actually means and everything. Because definitely you got people that are wanting to create the new Black Wall Streets of the world, but then you also got folks that are perfectly happy going to work at the corporate game and the corporate jobs and everything like that, and don't want to necessarily be part of a greater movement and everything like that. So that is a conversation that took place probably some 50, 60 years ago when my dad was a youngster and everything like that. And it's still a conversation that is going on even in this particular time and all along those lines. I mean, I was just having this conversation with my two nephews, because actually dad celebrated his 85th birthday, not yesterday, but the Friday before and everything like that. So in talking to them, one of them was saying that they wanted to go into law enforcement and either law enforcement or political science, because they have heard conversations both that I've had as well as their dad, my younger brother, as well as their dad, who is very much an activist and everything like that. So that's probably what is pushing them to want to go into that field, whereas their brother, and I believe that's the younger brother, because I think it's the older one that wants to do that particular field and everything, wants to be a computer scientist and everything. So they're trying to figure out what they want to do in their life and to be safe as they're figuring out their next steps and all along those lines. And just as a aside, because we've been having some very deep conversations since I got you ladies here, and Blue also as well, y'all will get a kick out of this, because we were ragging the older one and everything, because apparently he's got this thing in his life that many people don't get until they become teenagers. So they were ragging him because he has he had a girlfriend, and now the girlfriend is going off to deal with somebody else. So they're trying to figure out whether he can deal with that whole courtship part of his life as well. But he's trying to figure out whether he can maneuver and actually maneuver in that relationship space as well. So I know his younger brother was teasing him at that particular dinner, going like, well, I think he had a girlfriend. We don't think he's got a girlfriend anymore, because apparently somebody else has moved into that space.
Yeah. So, Cami, you brought something up that I want to delve into before we move into the next question. Now, being self-empowered and how it's attacked and criminalized. Yeah, that's true. You can't feel that you are empowered for anything. And I'm just talking about Black people at this point. I'm not intentionally leaving out the brown folk. I'm talking about us. Each time we become self-empowered, it is criminalized up until today. If we speak up about something, or let's say Black Lives Matter, let's use that as a good example. Black Lives Matter, how did that develop? It developed because we have people still being lynched till today, right? So now we're empowering ourselves and saying, you know what, we had enough. We're going to come together. We're sick of this. We're going to tell them what we're feeling. Most of the time, many of them were protesting in the streets. All these things were happening. Okay. But we're becoming self-empowered. Tell me how they answer that, everyone. The self-empowerment. What did they do to us to criminalize us for standing up? Tell me.
Well, I know one of the things I kept hearing is white lives matter too.
Yep.
White lives
And
matter.
they arrested them. They said that the people that was running it were not of the people or for the people, that they were using the money illicitly and buying properties with the money and not using it for the purposes it was deemed to be for. They broke up. They would always put police on them and over police them and arrest them and do all these things. But you know, we have other groups that do the same thing or do something similar and try to empower their communities, and they don't have no significant police presence bearing down on them, but actually in support of them.
But this is nothing new. There's a thing that was doing the civil rights area called COINTELPRO, where they literally put people into our civil rights groups and found ways to break up those groups or to corrupt those groups and everything like that. It was one of Hoover's initiatives and another folks' initiatives as well. So they've been doing that for a while and everything. And even to that point, how often have we heard people to this day talking about the Soros of the world and people like that, and they'll be saying that, you know, that there's not really a true Black Lives Matter movement or even a No Kings movement, but that it's all being financed by the rich elite, and that it is only a small percentage of folks that are actually out on the street. But last time I checked, several million people is a significant amount of people to be out in the streets, even if that's only a percentage of our population, because we know that for every one person that's out on the street, there were another 10 or 15 that probably wanted to be there, but for whatever reasons couldn't be out there, and all along those lines. But if you hear some of the critics out there, they will dismiss it because they'll be like, well, those people are paid agitators and everything like that. And I don't know about y'all, but I got some friends that were at the various marches, whether they were here in North Carolina, and even my dad's other half, his Lady Love and everything, was out there. We were actually having a salute to a prominent drummer, so I was not out there, and neither was Dad and everything like that. But we were there in the spirit and everything like that. And I don't know anybody that got paid any significant amount of money to be out there. They were out there because they sincerely cared about the issue and the fact that we were being exploited by those people in power now and everything like that. But you've got folks that will try to paint it as if this is a small fringe group that is only being paid by these paid agitators and everything. Blue, did you get a check yet from Soros or any of those people and everything like that? Because I haven't seen my check yet, so I haven't got one. If I got one, they hit it from me.
Shoot, if it's in there, if it's out there, I got hella interest on it because we've been waiting a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll never get paid for that. You got to be kidding me. That'll never happen. But Mark, I do agree that, you know, when we go into the streets and when we try to stand up for ourselves, again, there are people that are really genuinely doing this. Those that are even don't look like us. They are trying to assist because we've had help a long time ago till now, when the NAACP came into effect. We had other people that did not look like us, and they decided to join the fight. However, we still cannot be the people to go into the streets to fight, because you do hear white lives matter. Yes. Something happened to the police officers. All of a sudden, it was with Black Lives Matter. You have Blue Lives Matter. Does everybody remember that one too?
Yep.
So Blue Lives Matter. So if you notice, they match up to whatever we're doing. They match up to it. It doesn't matter what it is. Then you have a person like some of our senators that look like us talk against us, so they even make it worse. So you're not helping the situation, you're actually making it worse. So to me, these are the same people that continue to re-traumatize the community. So you're always going to have to be on the defense. So yes, I'm going to always have a wall up, because I don't know what's going to happen. Because if I bring it down, what you going to do to me? So we're always going to be on the traumatizing end. No matter what we do and how we navigate through this society, we are not going to feel free of trauma ever. But we do try to survive and coexist with the people around us all the time. So it's, you know, it's a tough situation to be in. Yeah, I see this. The goal is always divide, diminish, and devalue us. Amen. Of course it is. Because if we stand up, it is how we knock them back down. Because if we allow them to gain power that they've always had, because we always had it, then what will happen? They'll take over. Yeah, that's white supremacy. And I don't know if you all know, but white supremacy is a creation that is their mindset, that they believe that they are superior. They designed that in their way. And I know you all know this. This is something that Dr. Judithe talked about in her book as well, that as they began to take us, they started developing what that looks like to keep us suppressed. So that is always pinning us against each other, always creating fear. And that's how they controlled us. So then we now have to try to get a rise above that. And we have, but they find ways again to divide, diminish, and devalue. So I agree with those same three statements. This is going to be our last question for our roundtable talk here. Now, How do people of color interpret and process trauma? And are they always aware when they're experiencing it? Are they? Are we? What do you think?
I believe, well, I forgot the first part of the question, but I believe that as far as it pertains to trauma, it becomes so built into our psyche, so built into our character, our culture, the way we move, that we don't even realize that we're experiencing trauma because it's just who we are now. Probably since the beginning of our days, since our mom first put either a bottle in our mouth or to her boobie. It's just who we are, so we don't even know it. But yet we get hypertension, we get high stress, cortisol levels are off the chain, so we get sicker, quicker, faster. We have more health issues, more compacted health issues. Our life expectancy is that much shorter because of it, because all this that's on us, and we don't even realize it. I know sometimes I do this activity called progressive muscle relaxation. And when they do that exercise, the stuff that comes off of their stress, they don't realize how tense and how tight they are. They don't realize how clenched their jaw might be until they do that exercise and see, well, damn, why am I that tight?
So the first part of the question was, how do people of color interpret and process trauma? You answered it just by saying that. And are they always aware? No, we're not. We're not always aware that we are going through it. I will talk about my clients as well. It's like peeling back an onion, right? And Dr. DeGury said this too. You have the person coming in for their initial complaint. So let's say the complaint they said is, I am depressed. Okay, talk about that. Tell me about what your definition of depression is, and when was the last time you experienced depression, and what may have triggered it. So that's 3 questions, and now they're taking over. Now I'm starting to listen and I'm taking notes. Then I'm curious about who else in your family have experienced depression. All of a sudden it's depression, then anger, then guess what happens? I have been touched as a little person. That, or I've had, my mother hated me my whole life. Let me tell you how. Okay, now you're getting the foundation of this soul where you are with the depression. You have a foundation to why you're responding the way that you are and living the way that you're living. And you've been traumatized. So let's talk about that. So it's very touchy to go into the word trauma because they're looking at it as one thing, right? That I haven't been traumatized. I'm not sure what you're referring to. So then when I go back and I'm doing inner child work, because now I'm bringing them backwards to this little person. And I have to tell them, hey, this little person needs to be reparented. And they say, why? Because let's talk about your list. So now they begin to see the beginning and how they got to the depression of now. So the trauma, like you speak of, is not always seen, but the behavior is actually what is displayed, and other people see it, but they don't even know to tell them, hey, you've been traumatized, because no one is going to do that. I think us, those are in our profession, we can do that. We can walk up to a person and notice, hey, there's more to this depression and anxiety. There's something underneath that. So I do think, no, we don't always realize that we are experiencing it, but the things that we see in front of us, like a gunshot, that's a trauma. I work in the prison system, so does Anika. We see trauma every day. When something happens to an inmate, there's a trauma. So we're experiencing that also when we're walking in there every single day. And to be honest, being locked in, that's traumatizing too. Although we can walk out, we're still locked in there with them for hours at a time. Then we have to operate in a certain way. Not saying these guys will necessarily attack us, but they can. They can take over that whole person. So that is a traumatizing thing. Am I aware that I'm working there? Yes. Am I aware how I carry myself in that system? Yes. For my survival. So the same question. Anyone else with an answer to this? And I'll read the question again. How do people of color interpret and process trauma? And are they always aware when they're experiencing it?
Yeah, Dr. Diamond, because I know I have to leave. I have another again. If I could just, if I may, so I can
Sure.
get this for the afternoon. This was a very good topic. And as you said, is how do we respond? And sometimes I don't know. What I do now is I said before I put my hand on my chest, right now I'm calm. So I listen to my internal response. If my heart rate increases, that's when I have to know I need to respond to this. Sometimes I don't do so well because if I hear a trigger word, especially when a person says to me, oh, well, why are you your high energy? The high energy means that I was calm. You basically put me into a trauma response based on what you're doing, because I have to ask myself, why does this person feel the need to address me this way? And from there, whatever comes out my mouth, because if it goes left, I don't want to go somewhere where the response may not be good. And what I do now is think about the fight or flight response. And sometimes with little kids, what do you think? Someone says something to you, you automatically want to do a reaction. And then if you think about your family of origin, if someone disrespects you, you got to handle it on sight. That's what I was brought up into. But then handling it on site could cause you to have legal issues. And basically, then you have to address that, and that can follow you for the rest of your life. So now what I look at is, what do I have to lose by interacting with this individual? I need to be smart, because what I say or do may cause something. And once I'm triggered, I may not stop because I know myself. So what I would do, I'd rather walk away, and I'll say, you know what, give me a minute. Because if a person can't ask and give me that explanation, and that's why I'm working with the little ones, why does a person feel the need? So now I'm going to ask a question in a way to kind of draw it out of the individual. And if I can't get that out of them, then you know what? I got to go. That's the way that I get out of a situation, because right now you're pulling me down a tunnel that I know that may not be well. And I actually had to experience that not too long ago. And that was the trauma response, because I felt my elevation. I guess the individual also felt that. Now, me respecting this individual would think that I would never be put in this situation. So everything that we talked about today helped me to be more aware. So that's why I'm sharing that. Follow your internal responses. And with little kids, same thing. They have no words. They don't have a catalog of experiences like we do. So now every day is a school day. And that taught me there was an area that maybe I need to do some more inner work with for my child, because at that time I become the child that was hit at a young age. I become other things. And if I've overcome, why am I going to go backwards? So that's the whole thing. When you feel that, respond, do not react. And thank you, everyone. I have an event and I will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. And I'm going to listen to the following. Thank you.
Thank you, Toya. Have a good one, okay?
Take care. I hope I'm going to be seeing you soon. I didn't hear you.
No, I said have a good event.
Okay, thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay.
I would like to chime in on this. So I think some people don't acknowledge trauma and how it impacts them, because again, we were taught to get over it. So that's what they felt like they've done. They don't associate how their anger or the mistrust that they have for certain individuals as trauma that they face, because in their mind, they got over it. So it's not trauma. It is that single event, and they don't think about the molestation or the rape or the gunshot they heard every night before they go to bed. They don't think about it. It wasn't until I started looking into trauma, really understanding trauma, that I could identify the amount of traumas that I faced growing up, and the amount of traumas that my parents must have faced growing up, because we are taught to get over it, move on, be strong, and do what comes next. So I don't think people really think about their experiences as trauma until they start, until we, like you said earlier, Dr. Diamond, until we start diving deeper and helping them see that anger that keeps coming out, that mistrust that you have for individuals, is based on the fact that you were molested when you were younger, or for whatever else reason that they disclosed that they chose, like, no, I was over that. That's happened so long ago.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, we don't know that we're experiencing it until it's pointed out to us. So I do agree with you about that. Mark?
Too often, and I think that definitely Judith had kind of alluded to that. We internalize the trauma and don't really deal with the trauma the way that we should, and everything like that. Because there's a lot of times that you are afraid to deal with the trauma in your life, afraid to deal with the consequences of actually coming to terms with whatever the trauma is. Because I know a lot of times that we as individuals will internalize things and not really get into the depth of what that trauma is. It can be trauma within the family dynamics. It can be trauma of things that you went through in relationships and all along those lines. And then sometimes there is a fear. I know that earlier we were talking about on this topic and the other topics that we've had, this notion of people pleasing and everything like that. So sometimes people don't want to do the deep dig. And I know that many of you on this call are clinicians, and you have to actually dig deep into people's internal works and all along those lines, and their mental health and their emotional health and all in that space. But too often folks don't want to do with that because they are afraid of the consequences, particularly if they are in relationships, whether that is personal relationships or work relationships with people that are of other cultures, because you're afraid that you might lose some sort of friendship or some sort of allyship when you dig into those deep kind of problems that exist with this kind of trauma analysis. And that's what it basically amounts to, is you got to analyze the trauma. And sometimes we are afraid to analyze the trauma because we're afraid of what the consequences might be.
Mm-hmm. True.
I want to say, I think, number one, I think everybody has kind of really tapped into the answer to that question. And I agree with all of you. I say that trauma is twofold in the first part of your question, because yes, how do Black people interpret and process trauma? I think there
Mm-hmm.
is something to be considered of the biological, which Blue kind of touched on, and the psychological, which I think everyone else has kind of spoke about. When we talk about the womb, right? Children in womb feel and are connected to their mother. So whatever their mothers are experiencing and whatever their mother environment that she's around, they inherit that in their DNA. It is embedded. And so we have kind of that. And even if we're talking about the birthing experience, right? When mothers birth their children, and you talked a little bit about it, Dr. Diamond, about how even that is traumatic, right? Because Black women and their pain are not acknowledged in hospitals. And so I do think that it starts really in the womb. I think the other piece, and of course, then there's the psychological trauma, right? The psychological trauma is the trauma that starts in our life, like our familial makeup, our home life, our education, the school systems, our neighborhoods, all these things. These are like the socio environmental factors that impact how we perceive and process trauma. And so I do feel like there's a normalization, right, that we are almost born with, that it's normal to be tight. It's normal to be in this state of almost like survival of the fittest. You know what I mean? And so I do think that how we process it really is dependent upon the environments in which we grow up in, and what lessons we're taught and how we teach our children. Because to answer kind of your second question about that, is that, like, I think we will always be, I think, around trauma, because I just think this world is traumatic. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the silver lining to this is, right, is unlearning some of the things that just don't make sense anymore. And I feel like, that starts in the relationships, and like these conversations we're having today. It starts in how we parent our children. I now tell my child, speak your mind in that classroom, baby.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if the teacher tells you that you talk too much or you're too loud. Be loud. That is perfect. That is what you are supposed to be. Those types of things that we're doing to unlearn some of those historical behaviors and coping mechanisms that just don't work for us now. Because what we know, and this is something that came up when you were talking earlier, Dr. Diamond, is that when you talk about like George Floyd, and it took me to Zora Neale Hurston's quote. Like if you are silent in your pain, they will kill you and tell you that you liked it.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is like, we have to debunk those types of messages, those types of behaviors and actions. And I think that speaks to us like having these conversations out loud, saying we are not going to allow these white supremacist ideas and beliefs and division practices to withstand, because they ain't got nothing to stand on but our compliance. And I think when we stop being compliant to these practices, when we stop being compliant to, and even quiet and not voicing our opinion, we know it is scary to do. It is scary to go against the grain. But we now know over time that staying under the radar has never helped us. And so I do feel like there is a new process of how we are dealing with our pain that is coming into fruition. And we're also giving honor to our ancestors so we can heal from that slave mentality, from those practices from our past, because we do need to honor that. And we do need to give acknowledgement and recognition. And then we also need to say, okay, hey, that did work back then. It don't work now. Let's do something different and stand on it.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I want to piggyback off of what you're saying with unlearning. So the unlearning part is this. Let's look at it in a very simplistic way. You have Martin Luther King, you have Malcolm X. It's time to convert over to Malcolm X. Why? Because he spoke out like he was supposed to. Martin did it, but not the same way. When Malcolm talked, he shifted or he shook white people's bones. Like he passed the layer of the skin. He went to their bones to the point that they wanted to eliminate him. They had to, because he was just too powerful. What he was saying was to wake us up, because we were sleeping at the wheel. He said, wake up, because you don't see what I'm seeing, or you see it, but you don't want to acknowledge it. So I'm going to make you see it. I think that's where we need to go to, is to begin to shift. And like you said, as our children, my granddaughter, I did the same with her, and I did the same with my son. You speak up when someone says something to you, and don't allow that to happen. And it's funny because it happened to her yesterday. A little boy was trying to bully her, and she stood up for herself. As soon as she jumped into the little boy's face, here comes the sister. So the sister said, I'll slap you. And my granddaughter said, and let me tell you something. When you slap me, I'm going to slap you, and I'm going to unleash something you've never seen. Now, look, she's only 8 years old, but she's something to reckon with, okay? She is not going to allow you to harm her. And again, this is another person of color, because they're Hispanic. But they were ready. He was bullying her, and she didn't allow it. So I feel that when we stand in our power, we can make so many effective changes. So yes, I agree with you. Unlearn. So shifting to, I would like for us to shift to healing before we end our session today, or our show today. So when you think about the unlearn part, step one to healing, what are we talking about? What step one looks like? What is that? And what would step two be, and step three? And are there additional steps as we go along in this healing process from trauma to heal? What would that be?
Well, I think the first step is to, just like you've been doing on this show, is to inform people and to get a understanding of what the trauma is and why we have the trauma and how to deal with the trauma and even the healing process. It's hard to treat an ailment unless you know what the ailment is, and that's for any ailment, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, or whatever. And trauma would be the same thing. So we have to read and study these things, like you did with that video, and like there are several books that have been mentioned in this podcast. And all along those lines, you can look at Taisha Coates as one that wasn't mentioned, but there are several books that can deal with this topic and everything like that. And there have been several books on something that we kind of alluded to that is part of the trauma as well, which is that whole notion of code switching, which we are oftentimes notorious in dealing with, and all along those lines. So understanding that, and then having a better understanding of what the problem is, so that you can treat the problem and everything like that. And then kind of to what Toy was saying when she was here and everything, then sometimes you just got to have some of the time for yourself, whether that is internal meditation. And as I have said before on this show and several other shows that I'm part of, I'm a big believer in going outside and observing Mother Nature, and getting some peace of mind from Mother Nature, even thinking about things that I might have learned, whether it was on this podcast or other podcasts as well, and reflecting on it. Because definitely sometimes you got to get into a space where you can reflect and all along those lines. So I definitely think that is part of what it is finding time to relearn some of these things, and to also analyze and interpret what you have learned.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Another step.
Yeah, like you said, education is, foremost. Learn and get the information, because our traditional public schools and even some of our universities, and if it's not a HBCU, and even those are highly influenced by white norms, isn't going to give us the information. I think purposely seek out banned books to learn more. What they said, if you want to hide something from a Black person, what do? Put it in a book. Get the secrets back. Let's get these books. Let's read these books. Another thing is, find your community. Ubuntu. I am because we are because I am. I think we become, like Camille said earlier, we become so individualized and so put into like pockets of oneness, or just our immediate family, and not our whole entire village of a family. Find your village, find your community and build that community, educate and empower and inspire one another and grow together, because they can only defeat us when we're separated. There was a beautiful movie I seen many years ago called Ants. It was like, I don't know, 50 grasshoppers, but maybe 1,000 ants. But the grasshoppers were big and they were boisterous and they were powerful and they talked all this mess. But when the people realized that they were stronger together, they were able to defeat their enemy.
That's good.
I like that.
Yeah. I think I love everything that you all are saying. I think another thing to consider is we have to begin to tell our stories. We have to begin to verbalize our stories. We have to write our stories. I think what we have to do is, she mentioned her book being on the banned book list, right? And creating, I actually did a presentation on banned books, and majority of those books were about people of color, transgender populations, LGBTQAI community. So it was just, to me, it's like we have to keep writing those stories. We have to keep sharing those stories. We have to keep having the conversations out loud and in public. We have to keep voicing our disdain towards these belief systems and these systematic systems that have broken us down. And I think by us doing that, it may not be our generation that gets the healing, but the generations that come behind us are being taught that this is not okay. I also think that we have to explore. We speak a lot about, the United States. The United States has been for a long time kind of the epitome of, coming here for the land of the free, home of the brave, whatever. But we know that is not true. We know that there's not a ton of freedom here. So it's like, I ain't gonna lie. Let's, as Black people, we need to explore other cultures outside of the United States. We need to take ourselves and travel the world. And I say that because a lot of people that I've seen that travel, like I went to Europe for a little bit, and I went to Europe and I wasn't looking over my shoulder like that. Like, it was crazy. It was, now keep in mind, I was like one little raisin and a bunch of rice, but nobody was like, oh, looking down on me. Nobody, it was just cool. And I was in, spaces that people were just as kind. Like, it was just different. And I was like, we need to know what that's like, because I think what happens is, if we get so consumed with the culture of America, what ends up happening is we don't know anything different. So how can we dream anything different? So I do feel like we need to be able to experience something different so that we can then know how we want to apply it here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree with everything you're saying too. So, Blue, is there anything else you want to add on to this or
No,
no?
no,
You
I was
good?
saying that was a mic drop, is what I was saying.
Oh, you dropping the mic. It was a mic drop. It really was. I love everything you're saying because we have to. The unlearned part is everything. Teaching ourselves. I agree with everyone about education, and we have to start there to educate, to renew ourselves, and be ready to reset and reclaim who we're trying to be and where we're trying to grow or go. Even if we drop the jewels, the generation behind us can pick those jewels up and they can run with it. But it does take opening the book, instead of just running away from the knowledge, we need to run towards it. Yep. And understand it, and also understand what trauma is. And it's okay to have your own definition of trauma, but also understand how to work through what you're defining as you see it as your trauma. Because each one of us on this podcast right now have experienced trauma in a different way. So we are going to define it so differently. But in the end, it's about how do you heal? What's the first step?
Yeah.
And it is finding your tribe and the support group or real people to support you. And that's family and friends alike. And be careful who you bringing into your support system, because if your system is broken, they can't help you. They can re-traumatize you. So be aware and cognizant of who you're bringing around you as you move through the process of healing. That's pretty much what I have to say, because you all have hit it on the head of the steps to take. Anybody else? I see Anika was up here. She might have stepped off for a second, but I know we're getting really to the end of the show, but I would like to tell you all I enjoyed this discussion. It is a very tough discussion, but you know what, Mark? I really think that we do need to talk about code switching. I don't think a lot of people know what that is. And I think that will be a great discussion to have about code switching and what does that look like? How do we interpret that and how do we work through that? Because what is it? And how do we deal with people that code switch? So I know it's something that I don't want to talk about now because it will extend this time, but I would love to talk about this again, the code switching part, because I'm very interested in hearing, people's point of view on that and what that looks like. So when you brought that up, I wrote that right down. I said, next topic, code switching, because it needs to be addressed and how to deal with it, but also understand it.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Now, before we go, Judith, did you have anything to say about what we were just talking about? And then I would like our closing remarks.
I actually think between you, Blue and Chloe, and Mark, y'all hit it in the head about like the education and empowering. And I think the more we educate ourselves, the more we'll be able to identify what trauma is and start healing from it, because some of us don't want to acknowledge it because we don't understand it. So,
okay. All right. So we are at this point now where we're going to have our closing remarks here. We have now joined each other on the couch for the second time, and I would like to say to the three of you, thank you, and I hope to see you again, because I would love to invite you back again later on with maybe even possibly code switching. But I think we delve very heavily into what trauma looks like and how we walk through it. So what I would like is your parting words for those that have joined us on the couch today. And Judith, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to work my way around. I'll be the last person to go. So I would love to hear what your closing remarks would be to our watchers today that joined us on the couch.
My closing remarks is knowing your power and utilizing it and not allowing others to define who you are.
Thank you for that. Camille, what about you?
My closing remarks are educate, empower, and connect. And I will also add, can I share some resources in the chat to just like share with the audience? I encourage everybody to read White Supremacy Culture by Tima Okun. It is a really great read, and it does speak to some of the systems that are in place and how we have some of the things we need to unlearn in order to heal. And we're gonna be all right, y'all. At the end of the day, Kendrick Lamar, we're gonna be all right.
Be all right.
Blue, what about you?
I mean, they just dropped some downs right there. I mean, I'm a loss for words, to be honest. I would say that, recognize your pain, acknowledge your pain. A quote that I recently used: "It's okay to not be okay, but don't stay not okay. Work on being okay. We can feel whatever we're going to feel, what I'm saying, but don't stay in the feeling if it's going to work against you. What I'm saying? Continue to grow, continue to love yourself, re-embrace yourself, learn how to love yourself. A lot we navigate this world in such a way that we don't even know how to love ourselves. We're just so tight. What I'm saying? Get that monkey off your back and live and embrace this thing, because they're not gonna allow us to be. We have to be."
Mark?
Yeah, I agree with everybody's had some very powerful messages, and definitely we got to be the voice that we want to be, the voice of change. I know that that can sometimes be a cliche, but it's a very real cliche, and all along those lines. And definitely, whether it's the reading these books we're talking about, or whether it's listening to music of Gil Scott-Heron and some of the other revolutionary musicians that are out there and everything, these are places that we can learn some of these valuable lessons and everything like that. And, just got to be the best that you can be and everything like that. One of the things, and I'll just close with this remark, and all along those lines, that I remember that one of my fellow historians who passed away many years ago used to talk about, and that was Skippy Scarborough. He was actually the historian here at Haytide before I got this role and everything. Was he talked about how a lot of times we went out with pride. We went out with pride in the way that we treated ourselves and all along those lines. And I want us to recapture that pride, because he talks about how literally you would see people dressed to the nines, whether they were just going for a walk to the grocery store. They wouldn't even be going to church. They'd be just going out in the community and all along those lines. So he talked about that being the kind of pride that we had in this particular Black Wall Street, but I'm sure it existed because I've watched the movies in places like Tulsa, in places like Rosewood, in places like Central Park. So we can go back to that moment of being proud of who we are and proud of the differences that we've made in society, but also the differences that we are continuing to make. Because I think that everybody on here that has been on this particular call is a difference maker. So I think that that is something we can do, is go out and kind of have that self-awareness and self-pride.
Thank you. So I'm going to take it from here. And again, thank you all for being on the show. And Camille, can you please email me those links, those books, everything, and I'm going to put it on the Facebook page, because I think it's very important now, like we just said, that we have to be about our business by actually putting it out there so we can continue to educate the people on the couch. Thank you. I see it right there. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to utilize this here and make sure that I am putting it on our page, and from there. So again, our responsibility is to educate all of those that are coming behind us, watching us today, and that is our goal here. And again, I appreciate you all taking the time out to even come and sit with me on the couch to talk about this heavy discussion. I'm sorry, I'm distracting myself here trying to do this at the same time. Okay, I see it there as well. Someone else will put it in the comment too. More Than Therapy. Is that you all, right? That's the three of you. Is that your podcast? Thank you. Okay, it's yours. Okay, so I'm going to take it from here, and I'm going to do my last remarks as well. So I see you all waiting in the wings for me when I come out. Okay, see you all later. Okay, let's see what is happening here. This thing is not even working right. But anywho, so I would like to say this to all of those that are watching us today, that we thank you for joining us to talk about this hard topic that we discussed today. when you join us on the couch, we are bringing you vital content. And today you got to understand what it means to go through trauma, understand trauma, how it develops, understand that a lot of educators have been working on it. We've been talking about Dr. DeGuri today, and she is one of those people that really needs to be respected for the work that she's done. And I know to write her book, it took her 12 years to get that book together. And I have to say, I am very well educated by what she helped us with multitude of multi-generational trauma. Having an understanding of it will help you get through, help you heal, help you understand why you go through the things that you go through. You do have to go back to the past to fix your present. So it's very important that you remember that. Now, you've heard us all talk about trauma, how to understand it, walk through it, and how to heal from it. So please educate yourselves. And I'm pretty sure as you get through, you're going to get stronger and you're going to get wiser, and then you can educate someone else. So our goal is to work as one unified front. And we thank you again for joining us on the couch. Remember, peace, love, and tranquility. And healing is the number one thing for you to get through anything in life. So again, we thank you for joining us on the couch. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. And take care of yourselves. And remember, put yourself first, then you'll be able to take care of someone else. Take care, and we love you guys. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of On the Couch. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and found it as enlightening and inspiring as I did. Remember, the stories and experiences we share here are just the beginning of a much larger journey. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, look for the notification on Facebook, and find us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us keep the conversation going and reach more listeners just like you. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep the dialogue alive. Peace, love, and tranquility. Take care, and we'll see you on the couch.